So your main character is a wizard, let's call him Graham. Graham the wizard who likes cats, and throughout his story he's going to grow in magical power. He starts off pulling bunnies out of hats, not a hugely useful combat ability, and he's going to end up shooting lightning bolts from his fingertips instead of bunnies. His abilities are going to escalate, and it's the writer's job to make that escalation believable and avoid some of the many pitfalls. So let's take Graham the wizard who likes cats on a journey and discuss character arc aligned power escalation, escalation and tension, power creep, power ceilings, incomparables, and character challenges. And today's video is brought to you by my magical patrons. If you want to see more of this kind of writing and world building content, then please do consider supporting me down at the link below. Plus, one new patron who signs up this month will win a copy of On Writing and World Building Signed, which compiles a whole bunch of this kind of stuff into a easy to reference, easy to read book. Thank you, I'll see you on the Patreon Discord. The first common way that writers handle power escalation is by integrating it with character arcs. This trope goes way back to stories like only the true, noble, and honest King Arthur is able to pull the sword out of the stone. It is everywhere. That gaining abilities or mastering certain technologies requires specific character traits, such as in Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archives, where the characters of Dalinar and Kaladin slowly attain new abilities like those of the mystical order called the Knights Radiant, but they can only do so in accepting and living up to certain moral ideals. Kaladin gains new abilities when he accepts that protecting others means he should even protect those that he hates. This technique usually means that power escalation aligns with the growth of your characters, and this can be a really great way to not only ensure that character development is always front and center in your story, but that abilities feel earned. Part of power escalation is giving weight and meaning to gaining new abilities, and here, overcoming obstacles means overcoming personal issues. The flow of the tension in the story becomes more cohesive because the internal and external conflicts are fundamentally connected. And some writers don't just do this to give external conflicts emotional weight, but also to manifest internal conflicts in a really visceral way. Legend of Korra actually has some amazing imagery in this, in her dealing with PTSD. And part of this strategy is structural. Stories that use character arc aligned power escalation will usually mean that failure to defeat the antagonist or master certain abilities is caused by or happens at the same time as failures in one's character evolution. For example, Zuko finds himself unable to generate lightning in Avatar: The Last Airbender, and Iroh attributes this to him being unable to resolve the emotional turmoil inside of him, choosing between good and evil. But it is not as simple as giving a power up to your characters whenever they become a better person, like the universe hands out Good Samaritan coupons, although, maybe, to be fair, maybe your universe does that. Who am I to say? This is because allowing characters to fail in using powers at crucial points in the narrative is important because just like moral struggles and failures throughout the story are what make their eventual growth at the end all the more empowering, failure to use parts of the power system are what make their eventual mastery so satisfying. This is especially true if failure has major consequences for their emotional journey. Though character arc aligned power escalation is sometimes inverted, where power escalation is actually a failure of character. Consider Meliodas in Seven Deadly Sins, who holds the ability to counter any attack thrown at him, and has virtually unlimited power at his fingertips, should he give into hatred and rage. These sorts of stories, often featuring overpowered characters or characters with somewhat uncontrollable magic, allow the author to explore a unique tension between gaining the ability to defeat the antagonist and remaining a good person, or even human. It's a thematic idea that power costs your humanity, and their character arc is often focused around overcoming the temptation of power and finding a new way to defeat the antagonist. Another example of this is where becoming a better person actually depowers the character, like Zuko loses the ability to firebend when he lets go of his rage and hatred which previously fueled it, and they have to find a new way to gain power. And where normal power escalation where the character grows in power as they grow as a person doesn't usually affect their relationships too much, the power escalation in these kinds of stories is given narrative weight by seeing how it affects the relationships of the protagonist and how they view themselves, because it's usually in a negative way, becoming a great source of internal and relational tension. And I feel like there's a lot to kind of mine there that we haven't seen in fantasy stories yet. And while character arc aligned power escalation has its benefits, it will not fit for every story. Extremely hard power systems tend to stay away from aligning with character arcs because emotions and character traits aren't strictly definable or predictable, really quantifiable. If handled badly, the escalation in power can amount to these tropish scenarios where Graham the wizard who likes cats succeeds because
#the power of friendship,
or just getting really angry and yelling louder than his opponent. Here's looking at you, Dragon Ball Z. Overall, it's a more useful technique for soft power systems. If you wish to have a power system where the only factor is how creative and intelligent a character is in using it, then incorporating character elements is going to undermine the dramatic tension that you're going for. And that's totally fine. It's not going to fit for your story. That's not a problem. You can still have really powerful character arcs. And there's a lot to be said for emotional beats of a story that stand on their own, that don't need that sort of propping up. And where authors don't want to do this, it mostly comes down to two principles: predictability and consistency. Two principles that make powers logical and believable as they grow in the story, however they gain them. I will refer you to my series on hard magic systems because I kind of talk through this for the entirety of the video, and this is specifically about power escalation. But basically make sure that evolutions in your power system are predictable and consistent. That's what makes them feel earned in a hard magic system. But let's talk about two: escalation and tension. It's almost universally true for the power system to escalate as the tension escalates. This allows Graham the wizard who likes cats to face bigger stakes, do grander things, and defeat more dangerous threats as the story progresses, something that's completely natural in both a single book or a series of books. Consider Lev Grossman's Magician series. The first book has Quentin and other characters using moderate magical abilities to take down the Beast, a creature killing students. The second book scales up the stakes and their powers as they face old gods who have returned to get rid of magic. And the third does this yet again, scaling up these stakes and their powers with the entirety of the magical world about to be destroyed, and the characters having to learn bigger and more fantastical spells to resolve the plot, like literally recreating the magical world. It's really fascinating to see what the magic system is capable of, and whether throughout a single book or a series, scaling up the stakes, the threat, and escalating the power system with it is exciting. To a point. Some writers fall into the trap of thinking that because either each story in a series or the arc of their single book is continually bigger, better, bolder, stronger, faster, #more, with continually grander displays of the power system, that it will be more exciting and emotionally investing. But no, of course not. This is called power creep, and it's when power escalation eclipses story and undermines narrative tension. One reason for this is stakes. One symptom of power creep is exponentially growing stakes to match the power escalation. Book 1, Graham the Wizard Who Likes Cats is concerned because we have to save this family. Book 2, Graham the Wizard Who Likes Cats is concerned because this entire city will be destroyed. Book 3, Graham the Wizard Who Likes Cats is concerned because this entire planet will be destroyed. At some point, readers just stop caring because we have no real grasp of that kind of scale. In Artemis Fowl the Last Guardian, the possible loss of Butler, a character that we have known for 8 books now in the climax, has more emotional weight than the possibility of the world ending. And this is especially true if this kind of scale is used over and over again in a series, which continual power escalation tends to lead to, because the writer thinks that they could easily solve small problems now. A second reason is immersion. There is a lot of power escalation in Sanderson's Mistborn series, but it never loses the foundational rules and framework that made it unique and immersive in The Final Empire, the first book. Skilled people doing very smart things with the elementic magic system. In contrast, shonen anime like Naruto are often criticized for losing what made their original stories unique and immersive, with characters shooting energy blasts into the moon, and the strategy and ninja training that used to be at the core of the show hardly even mattering anymore. And where Sanderson's narrative remained immersive because the escalation of elementic powers always felt possible within the world from the beginning, steep power escalation risks losing immersion and a degree of what made the original story special, especially if some of the nuances of the magic system are lost for the sake of grander abilities. And this is why power ceilings are important, establishing the magnitude to which your power system can go early in the story. In the Wachowskis' The Matrix, the power ceiling was established using the antagonists, the agents, with one very specific and clear ability. This was the peak of one's abilities within the Matrix, and it's what we knew Neo could be heading towards. Power ceilings not only help powers feel earned though, because the escalation didn't come out of nowhere, but it helps the story remain immersive because you don't undermine the rules you created as the power system escalates. Of course, necessarily, don't break this power ceiling, which is exactly what the Matrix sequels did, as well as Season 2 of Legend of Korra. Korra had already mastered all 4 elements and the Avatar state by the end of Season 1 out of 4. This was the power ceiling, and then... fighting the embodiment of chaos with the laser beams. This was a bizarre fight that was difficult to care about, and this led to the aforementioned criticisms, losing some of what made the original story special for the sake of spectacle because they think they have to do this to raise tension. Though I am happy to say that the writers of Korra recognized this, for the most part. In contrast, Rayamini Feist's Rift War saga worked because despite massive power escalation with fireballs in the first book and fighting ancient dragon gods in the third book, it established a power ceiling with Macross the Black, and Feist stuck to it, so it wasn't surprising that by the third book we were at that level that we had briefly seen before. And it's here we get to the heart of the issue. How do you maintain or continue building tension when the author does not wish the power system to escalate anymore? Say the author wants characters to become as powerful as they will ever be partway through the book. Maybe Graham the Wizard Who Likes Cats reaches his peak by the end of the second act, just like Ged in Ursula Le Guin's A Wizard of Earthsea. What then? The assumption is that because the greatest tension is at this point in the story, then their powers must escalate continually till that point. Otherwise, they would be powerful enough to resolve the plot, right? Well, no. Or a second scenario would be an ongoing series. The assumption is that because Graham the Wizard Who Likes Cats needs to become more powerful than Villain 1 to defeat them in the first book, thus, to maintain tension, Villain 2 must be more powerful than Villain 1. And then Graham must become more powerful than Villain 2, ad infinitum. Otherwise, Graham the Wizard Who Likes Cats could resolve the plot instantly, right? Well, once again, no. We'll talk through 2 primary techniques which address this, and are arguably most effective when they're used together: incomparables and character challenges. Firstly, incomparables. Incomparables are abilities that don't work on the same scale as the protagonist. In Marvel's Jessica Jones series, the protagonist has super strength, and each of the 3 seasons are self-contained stories with new antagonists in each arc. In the first series, Jones has to face down against a man who can force others to do anything with just his voice. Second season, she faces down against a family member with the same powers as her, and in the third season, the antagonist isn't even powered. He's just an extraordinarily cunning serial killer. Of these 3 powers, only one exists on the same scale as the protagonist, and they weren't even technically an antagonist. The tension dynamic and obstacles to taking down someone who can mind control are vastly different to taking down a manipulative, cunning serial killer with the law on his side. Despite no escalation in Jones's powers, with her being essentially as strong as she ever will be right from the start, tension is steadily maintained because Villain 3 isn't stronger than Villain 2 or Villain 1. They just pose a different challenge for Jessica Jones. The obstacles our hero faces are incomparable, and even if she does get stronger as the story goes, beating Kilgrave in Season 1 does not make her automatically equipped to defeat Salinger in Season 3. Incomparables mean that the threat an antagonist poses does not have to be measured against the previous antagonist, and a protagonist's powers escalating even to their highest point does not mean they're automatically stronger than the person with that incomparable ability. Patrick Rothfuss is the author of Name of the Wind, the Kingkiller Chronicles, which involve Kvothe continually becoming more powerful within the magic system across the books. In talking about handling power creep, he said, Kvothe learns things and becomes slightly more powerful, but he solves all of his problems not through the application of power, but because he's clever. And if you're clever once, you have to be clever again. There's constant tension. And it's this idea that is really at the heart of stories that use incomparables. Attaining power alone won't defeat the antagonist, because the powers of your protagonist and your antagonist are not on the same scale. They've got to have something else, like maybe the #power of friendship. Secondly, character challenges. In a similar way to how incomparable abilities mean that power escalation doesn't really matter, creating antagonists who challenge the protagonist in a personal way does the same thing. The Joker of Nolan's The Dark Knight is arguably the weakest antagonist that Batman faces, and the stakes are even the smallest in his story. It's just 2 boatloads of people compared to a whole city. But it's arguably the most tense of the trilogy. Power escalation matters little here because the tension of the story is derived from moral choices that Batman is repeatedly forced to make, no matter how powerful he becomes. Not that Batman has powers, like Graham the Wizard Who Likes Cats. As mentioned before though, these 2 strategies are best used together, an antagonist whose abilities require them to not just be powerful, but smart, and they challenge them in a personal way. One example is Daredevil's adversary Kingpin. He exemplifies this, a blind athlete against a cunning criminal with super strength, where much of the tension is really derived from not outmatching him, but whether Kingpin can force him to kill, a moral line that he has refused to cross. These techniques also work for overpowered characters, or stories about people whose powers don't escalate at all. Handling power escalation is difficult, and it's been done badly a bazillion times. It's also been done really well a bazillion times. It's really more about allowing the story to grow organically without it losing the spectacle. That ultimately, the magic system, while a really cool part of any of the world building, and how it is used in the story, is there to support the rest of the story. To support the characters, their growth, their relationships, and the tension they have with the antagonist. Spectacle of the magic system by itself isn't necessarily that engaging, as much as we love the magic systems that we create. So, to summarize all of these points, one way to escalate power systems logically, believably, and make powers feel earned is with character arc-aligned power systems. This helps with narrative cohesion by tying internal and external conflicts together, however, it is less suited for hard magic systems. 2. It is natural for power systems to escalate as the tension rises throughout a single book or a series, however, taking this too far results in power creep, which in turn undermines narrative tension through a lack of believable stakes and a loss of immersive elements. 3. Power ceilings not only help powers feel earned because the reader sees capabilities beforehand, but it helps maintain immersion because power escalation doesn't undermine the world that you originally created. 4. One way to maintain tension without power escalation is through incomparable abilities, meaning that power escalation is not necessarily required to defeat them, and each antagonist need not be measured against the last. And 5. A second way to maintain tension without power escalation is through character challenges, antagonists who challenge the protagonist on a personal level, and the tension is derived from difficult moral choices that they're forced to make. These 2 strategies are best used together though.
And that's me. This video has been hell. People on the Discord, you would know. Normally I'm done by like around Wednesday with the script. It took me till Friday morning. It's like Friday afternoon as I'm filming it now. So I'm gonna have to really muscle to get all the editing done. The topic changed a bazillion times. I really enjoy doing these kind of technical videos, ones which kind of look at writing techniques more than tropes. Tropes are fun to talk about, but techniques are ultimately going to be more helpful, like the 2 videos I did on delivering exposition, which if you haven't seen, go check them out, are some of the best videos I feel I've ever done in this series. And I really like them because they feel a lot more grounded and helpful and like broadly applicable to every writer. But yeah, so tell me about your stories. What's the power escalation like? What's the magic system and how does it grow? Where does it start? Where does it end? How big can it get? Let me know down below. In the meantime, stay nerdy and I will see you in the future.